for this chapter is Extinction, Biodiversity, Lost Forever. So if you have your textbook and if you want to use your textbook as reference, this is actually found on page 86. Again, we're now on chapter 4, the final chapter for this quarter, and it's found on page 86. So before we actually go to our discussion, let me first genuinely congratulate everyone. We are now on our final week. And of course, that means if you are probably an athlete or a person, or if you have experience joining a marathon, you know the adrenaline rush, the excitement when you know that you are now on the final stretch of an event or a competition or a marathon, di ba? It's the adrenaline that pushes you to really finish your goal, finish the competition, and of course, finish the marathon. So I know it's tempting to relax because knowing that gamay na lang kulang, okay na. But take note, just like as the analogy that I just shared a while ago, it's actually the last few minutes or the final stretch of any event that is actually considered to be the most crucial part that will determine whether you are really gonna be the winner or not, diba? So it's very important that we have that mindset that yes, it's now the final stretch and I'm very close to my goal, to the finish line, but I should not relax because it doesn't mean that if I'm closer I should actually double my efforts, because again, this is the time wherein it's the most crucial part. If you can still sustain the energy, the enthusiasm, the what you call this, the drive to really end the school year as you imagine it to be. So it is the best time to really give your best. But of course, for reaching this part of our school year, you are already a winner. So the next few week is now simply determining whether you will gain a gold, silver, or a bronze medal. So you're already a winner. Now just determining your spot in the podium, whether you will get the gold, silver, or bronze. Okay? So I hope in line with that, I actually made the last or the second module for this quarter already available. I hope you were able to notice this. This was actually published last Saturday, 9:30 a.m. So on our class card, you will notice that there's an entry titled Module 2 for the fourth quarter. So please, I highly encourage everyone to please download the copy so that, of course, even if it's the last week, you will know the the timeline, the sequence of our discussion for the last 4 days of the school year. So for this afternoon, we actually have three objectives. Okay. So first of all, we will start with the terms and processes involved in biodiversity and extinction so that we know what do we really mean when we talk about biodiversity and extinction, sorry. And then of course, as a process there's as a process we need to understand what causes population extinction. So what are these factors that really triggers or either um, uh, makes a population more susceptible or resist extinction. And then lastly, we will try to also explain that why or the significance while a failure of a population of a certain organism to adapt can actually put them to a higher risk to going extinct. All right? So, it's very important that the organism, we need to understand the relationship and the interaction, the dynamic between the organism and its environment, and of course, whether this will, as I've mentioned, hinder or make an individual or an organism more susceptible to extinction. So let's begin first with this very simple question. Just trivia lang. So Based on what you know, okay, do you know how much organisms, living organism that includes, of course, plants and animals, exist here on Earth? Anyone? What's your estimate based on the number? You can type your answer on the comment section. The estimate, how many? Is it thousand, 100,000, million? Is it billion? So we have um, guesses here on the from the comment section. We have Rupert 9 million. According to Pauline, her guess is 10 billion. So far they have the same idea that more or less it's a billion. So that's how many the organisms are here on Earth. As of course, as I've said, that's both plants and animals. Any other guess or estimate that you might have in terms of the number of organisms here on Earth? Okay, Ira said 8 million. Okay, so far, the idea there is that Rupert, Pauline, and Ira said it's between a million and a billion. So, dili ta maka, from their answer, we can actually conclude that three of the answers actually agree that the idea that there are a lot of organisms here on Earth. So let's put that into perspective. So there is actually an estimated of 8.7 millions of species, meaning different variations of these organisms, both plants and animals, exist. But what is alarming in this statement is that, however, based on that number, there are actually 1.2 million of species that are not yet identified and not yet described, not yet documented. And most of them are actually insects. So of course, if that's the reality about the number of organisms here on Earth, okay, another thing that we also need to bear in mind is that there are also a lot of number of these individuals or organisms that are not yet identified and described. So we will understand later on what's the significance if they are not identified, described, and documented at the present. So based on the Philippine biodiversity conservation priorities in the Philippines, there are actually 52,177 described species, which is more than half is found nowhere else in the world. Meaning from that population, half of that is actually endemic, meaning they are unique to the Philippines and they are not found in other places in the world. So that means they are more or less unique to our country. Now, so this will give us a good idea how rich and how diverse our biodiversity. So what do we mean by biodiversity? Anyone who has an idea before I reveal the description on the screen? Anyone? When you talk about biodiversity, what comes to your mind? So it's actually made up of two words. Yes, Miles. According to Miles, it's the diverse form of life on Earth. So yes, that is actually correct. So if we if we dissect the term biodiversity, it's actually made up of two words. Bio means life, and diversity means variation or divergency or pagkakaiba in our local terms. So when you talk about biodiversity, it actually talks about the large amount of diversity or variation of life here on Earth. So, according to Miles, that's actually correct. Wherein, when you talk about biodiversity, it's not only limited to plants, animals, but it also includes humans and other microorganisms. So, even the organisms that we cannot actually observe or see through our naked eye, they are also counted as part of biodiversity. And you've noticed when, of course, unfortunately, but it's a reality, right? You probably noticed that for the COVID virus, diba? COVID is actually um, it's a microorganism. It's a sickness that is, of course, the vector is meaning a carrier is a virus. So that means it actually evolved. 'Di ba? There are now, we have Delta, Omicron, and they also just recently they had their combination between um Deltacron. It's a hybrid between Omicron and Delta. So that means as an organism, it is evolving rapidly compared to other living forms because they are very tiny. So it's easier for them to evolve and become divergent from one colony to another. Munang it's that's the challenging part of the COVID-19 because it's the vector is a microorganism. So going back, so hence it's very important that it's very what they call this a mandate to us humans, di ba? If you base on the biblical scriptures, of course, all of us here probably are we are all believers, right? Of the supreme being that primarily our role is to become stewards of the planet, 'di ba? Unfortunately, of course, sometimes we are overwhelmed with our earthly responsibilities, earthly roles, and earthly wants. We tend to forget that primary role, and that is to protect and maintain the balance between the environment and of course the organisms that are living in the environment, and of course hopefully we can actually prevent the extinction of these organisms. So why is it important to uh, delay or at least maintain the balance between a bit maintain a balance in the process of extinction? So they know that extinction is something not bad. Just like global warming, it's part of nature's way of cleansing, purging the planet. However, when we mix human intervention or human activities, these biological processes have accelerated multiple times compared to what it should be if humans are not part of the equation. So, kung walay tao unta, this process is actually gradual. But of course, you already know that because of our needs to or for us to address or answer our needs, sometimes companies and even individual people, we tend to forget to consider our impact to the environment. So, going back to extinction, it's a natural process, as I've mentioned, just like your global warming. It's a way of purging or removing other organisms in the planet. Now, extinction can also be considered wherein it's highlighted by the death of the last individual of that particular species. At this point, if that happens, it means there's no more living um, member of that population. Therefore, it is now difficult for them to produce new members or offspring. And therefore, if the last member dies for that particular population, they can no longer be recovered afterwards. No worries, Jade, I understand. Yes, thank you, Jade, for informing me. So don't worry, Jade, we just started actually. All right. Anyway, I'm still in the introduction part. So far, I already explained the biodiversity and at the same time the extinction part. So let us check if we more or less know which organisms we know that are already considered extinct. So let me share something on screen. So this is a very a simple activity, all right? So I will be presenting a particular image of an organism, whether it's plant or animal, and then what you will do on the side, there are four options. What you do is simply to select among the options the identity or the name of that particular extinct um, organism. So in this case, animals. Okay. So let us start. Okay. So we have here picture number one. A, is this a zebra? B, a rhinoceros? C, an elephant? Or D, a deer. So anyone, you can unmute yourself. Okay, we have Miles, Ira, Aliana, Sophia, Kate, Pauline, Isa, Lawrence, Judy, um, Jade, and Gab. So let me, okay, also Ian and Rupert. Okay, so let me check if our guess is correct. Okay, very good. That's indeed a black rhinoceros. Okay, here, probably you've seen this organism or this animal featured in the movie Up, diba? If you're familiar with the movie Up by Pixar. So we have Ira, Miles, Pauline, Sophia, Ian, Lawrence, and Candy, together with Isa and Jade, and Kate. All of them, they chose dodo, and let's check if it's indeed a dodo. Yes, it is a dodo. Okay, let's have the second image. Okay, is this a woolly mammoth, a bush elephant, a black bear, or a blue whale? Okay, so probably it's easy for us to identify or guess the name of this or the identity of this organism. If you've seen the movie, was that Ice Age, right? Ice Age. Um, one of the beta or the protagonist in the movie. We have, I'm not familiar with the names anyway, but this is indeed a woolly mammoth. Okay, let's go to the second to the last. Okay, here. Is this a lion, a tiger, a jaguar, or a saber-toothed cat? So looking at the prominent feature, it has a two protruding and sharp teeth. Of course, probably this is designed to tear off flesh of its prey. So this is actually a saber-toothed cat. And then lastly, probably some of you have heard of this. Is this a hyena, a tiger, a wolf? It's either timber wolf or a Ethiopian wolf. This is actually the organism or the animal that was used as what do you call that? Um, inspiration. Inspiration for the characters Looney Tune, Tasmanian Devil, if you're familiar with that. So this is actually a Tasmanian tiger. So it is a cat. All right. All right. So most of us here actually know the answers. So thank you for your participation. So let's now proceed. Okay. So what we will do here for us to better understand the concept of biodiversity in relation to extinction, we will be watching a very short documentary by BBC News, and I hope we can really uh, listen intently on the details that were mentioned from the video. And of course, if ever it's really difficult for you to stay or watch the video, you can actually watch them or this video later on during your most convenient time. So let me share it on the screen. By the way, no, let me swap my sharing with tab so that we can include the audio. All right. So please take note again, the video link is already found on our module. So I highly encourage you to rewatch this later on during your most convenient time. So by the way, I will be turning off my camera to lessen the lag from my end. I hope you'll enjoy and of course pay attention to the many details that will be presented in the video.
Scientists estimate that billions of species have lived on Earth since life began around 3.5 billion years ago. And over the course of that time, 99% of them have become extinct. But scientists say we're now losing species at the fastest rate for millions of years. So what does this mean for the planet? And what does it mean for us?
So species go extinct normally. This is a natural process, but sometimes there are periods where a lot of species go extinct at a single event, and this is what it's called a mass extinction.
Scientists have identified 5 of these events in the history of the Earth. And from what they know, in each instance, around 75% of the planet's species disappeared over millions of years.
So we expect a number of species to go extinct every few thousands of years. But currently we have evidence of a large number of species that have already gone extinct in the past few decades or hundreds of years. And this is way higher than we'd expect just by chance. The expectation now is that the current extinction will be much faster. The most important factors is habitat transformation. This is particularly important in the tropics. Climate change, species exploitation, and pollution. As soon as climate change starts interacting with this lack of habitat that we find, then that's when we're going to start seeing thousands of species going extinct. There is the intrinsic value of a species. So polar bears are quite important for us, and orangutans are quite important for us. And those species, once extinct, they'll never come back. I don't think humans are likely to go extinct in the near future. We have incredibly broad needs, and we can live anywhere, we can eat anything. It is likely that the changes that we're causing the environment will drive us to wars or drive us to human conflict, and this may lead us to extinction. There are many things that we can do. In terms of habitat transformation, for instance, we can reduce deforestation in the tropics to zero, and all of this can be done without compromising the amount of food that we produce for ourselves. So there is no debate within the scientific community whether we need to save species or produce food. We can do both. But for climate change, we're just going to have to be more frugal, we're going to have to eat less meat, fly less, and just change our lifestyle.
So I hope you enjoyed and, of course, was able to pinpoint or pick up some of the information. The video actually gives us a preview of our discussion for this afternoon. So for this afternoon, we will first focus on the patterns and causes of extinctions. So this is actually found on our textbook, page 98 to 105. So for our points of our the segments or sections of our discussion for this afternoon, we'll begin with the process of extinction, the patterns of extinction, and then we will end with the causes of extinction. So let's begin with the process. So how extinction happens, it follows a certain flow or order. It begins with a local extinction, followed by biological, and then lastly, it ends with an ecological extinction. So, how do we differentiate the different stages? Number one is that when we talk about local extinction, or when an animal becomes locally extinct, it means that the particular species is still found somewhere else, but have been eliminated from a certain area or eradicated from that certain area. One example for this is the population of what do you call this, elephants in northern Luzon, particularly in Cagayan Valley. So before there were records that mentioned that these group of animals actually inhabited the area. But because of unfavorable condition and human exploitation, eventually these organisms have been totally erased from that area. But it doesn't mean that this species of elephants are no longer found in other places in the world. So specific lang siya onto one specific area or locality. Another example is we have here a tiger. It's actually it has been there has been records that stated that or documented that tigers were actually once inhabited the island. But of course, same thing what happened um with elephants in the north. They become eventually they actually became extinct due to um habitat loss and of course sadly human intervention. And then what do we mean by biological extinction? So this means that no individual species is found in the world. So it's already considered that um, based on record, this group of organisms are no longer present in multiple areas of the world. But of course, we cannot always say that it's a 100% accurate information because sometimes um, um, keeping track of these organisms may be difficult because especially if they are migratories or sometimes these organisms are too tiny to be observed by naked eye. So one is example the Tasmanian tiger, wherein it was first noted that it actually inhabited the countries or areas near the Australia. However, because of hunting, introduction of diseases, and other human intervention, actually the last known species was actually um, noted to die in Hobart Zoo in 1936. What do we mean by ecological extinction? Now, biological, it's more considered on the physical aspect of the organism. But when you talk about ecological, this is more on the we're talking about the possibility of an organism to produce another offspring. So here there are still in few individuals for that particular species. However, their interaction and the chance for them to produce new members is actually very, very low. So probably you've heard of the news wherein there were actually kanang number limited number of rhinoceros, and then some of them are kanang murag isa na lang to ka pair, and because they are in captive, it's really difficult for them to produce offspring because probably it's not their environment, stress, their diet, and other factors. And therefore, it means that if if there are no more healthy members or representative of that population, it's really on the verge of going extinct. And of course, if example, unfortunately, the only surviving members are both males or both females. Therefore, they cannot mate. Therefore, they cannot produce new members. So technically, they are now considered ecologically extinct because the existing members are no longer capable of producing new members. So pwede po that both let us say they are both male and female, however they are already past their reproductive age, so technically it's also impossible for them to produce new members. Now let's proceed to the patterns of extinction. So there's a process what we call as speciation, wherein it's a slow evolutionary process by which new species are actually what do you call this formed. So from let us say a group of birds, there is a variation or speciation of in terms of their um, beak, migratory patterns, and so on. So eventually, over time, some of the organisms will have a variation from their main branch. So mag-deviate siya from the main group or population. So, however, the rate of speciation must be the same with the rate of extinction to maintain the diversity of life here on Earth. However, it has been recorded and it's been reported that the decline or the decrease of biodiversity is actually very fast compared to the process of speciation. So that means more and more species are actually terminated or no longer present in the environment. And sadly, some of these species are actually not yet recorded or not yet properly documented. So the rate of speciation is actually very slow compared to the process of um, what do you call this, process of biodiversity extinction. So what are the possible causes of extinction? So there are six reasons that have been identified, and it's actually um, made into an abbreviation or an acronym so that it's easier for us to remember. So the six causes or reasons for extinction are presented in the following. We have HIPPCO or HIPCO, if you read that, and these are actually the reasons why Earth is losing diversity. So we have here for H, we have habitat destruction, degradation, and fragmentation. Then we have the introduction of invasive species. We have population. By the way, we have here population using too many resources. So when you talk about habitat destruction, I forgot to mention, it can be into it can be in a form of deforestation. It could also be a form of kaning natural calamity if an area has been flooded or landslide or there has been forest fire, or if it's a natural forest fire na pud siya fires that are of course induced by humans, or pwede po siya fire caused by erupting volcanoes, that could also be, or the movement of lava or kanang inana in that area. And then of course, um, when agricultural or forest lands have been or been converted to mga private lands or private, we call that mga private na mga what do you call that, nasa kanang mga Pueblo de Oro and so on, mga private siya na mga kalimot ko sa pangalan, what do we call that sa pueblo kanang mga kanang um nakakalimot ko sa pangalan. Anyway, I think you get the point. Subdivision. Okay, thank you, Miles. Mga private na subdivision. So sometimes, because of the demand for housing, kat ng mga areas na mga mountain ranges or mountains have been, of course, converted into private properties and or private subdivisions. And of course, we have the introduction of species wherein species from other countries they are imported to the Philippines para sa either because of their kanang they're exotic or kanang unique siya ng mga animals, and then sometimes if they are not properly kanang um, cared of by their pet owner, sometimes they escape from their kanang cages, and they will go to the different communities or mga kanaan, and then of course they will if they are predators, they actually threaten the population of other organisms. And then of course and so on. And then you have the population. So a good example for this is of course people, humans, wherein we don't have enough supply of food that can actually cause panic or panic buying. And so of course, especially that our society now is dependent on supply and demand or kaning economics rather than of course agricultural, wherein we need to grow or we or dependent on the resources that we grow from our backyard, but that's not really applicable to all, especially those who are living in urban areas. And then, of course, pollution that can be in form of um, air, water, land pollution, and even noise pollution, di ba? Our noise can actually put other organisms into a stressful situation. So you've probably noticed your pets during kind of mga Christmas or New Year's wherein it's very noisy because of kanang the parties and of course the fireworks and so on. 'Di ba they actually go to stress. So if your pets are in the comfort of your home, how much more the animals who are in the wild or they are exposed to different forms of noise pollution, 'di ba? Sometimes kanang camping ta, if you are very noisy in the campsite, that's also one way of introducing noise pollution the to the wild or to that particular place. And then of course, you have climate change. Again, this is not something that's wrong, but of course, it has increased and has and the effects of climate change have been, of course, more destructive over the years. And then we have overexploitation. We get too much than what we actually need, and as a result, we actually put that that particular species to verge of extinction because we are harvesting too much or getting too much from the environment than we need. So what we will do is that as we proceed with our discussion, um, we will actually identify how examples of these reasons or causes of extinction in the form of images. So that's with our task later on. So it also all boils down that all most of if not all of the causes or reasons for extinction are actually can be traced back to human activities, unfortunately. Of course, again, because we are very more or less it was mentioned that among all other organisms aside from being the top of the food chain, we don't have our direct predator. We are also more resilient among other organism. We can actually thrive and survive any conditions because we are more adaptable to them. And therefore, it's really difficult for humans or it takes time or grabe gud ang dapat mahitabo for human population to really decrease significantly. And of course, the demands of our lifestyle can actually put the ecosystem at risk because of our high demand. Okay? So 99% of recent species extinctions are actually attributed to human activities. So let's now proceed to our picture analysis. So what we will do, as I've mentioned, I will be sharing on the screen a picture and hopefully you can pinpoint the cause or reason that is being depicted on that particular picture. So it's up to you if you want. You may activate the raise hand button if you want to answer, or you can actually type your answer on the comment section. So any of the 6 reasons that I mentioned a while ago. So let's start with picture number 1. So what do you think is the cause or reason of extinction being depicted on this image? Anyone? Again, you may unmute yourself or you may type your answer on the comment section. So we have here Miles, deforestation. Okay, Candy also, deforestation. So deforestation is only under one specific HIPCO reason. So which among? Habitat loss, yes. That could also be one. So if you look at this, we have here deers on the front, and as you can see on the back, trees have been cut off, right? Habitat destruction. Yes, so as you can see here, because the trees have been cut down, these animals here on front are more exposed. So either exposed to the predator, exposed to other external environment or external factor. So this is an example. Yes, all of these are all of that. All of your answer actually relates to this one. We have the habitat destruction, fragmentation. It could also, if you want to be specific, there it's an example of deforestation or habitat loss. Okay, how about this one? Okay, this is of course a cartoon version, but hopefully you can get the point of the imagery here. So if ever it's difficult for you to understand, this is actually um if you're familiar, a janitor fish. So what do you think is the cause or reason for depicted here? All right, so we have the introduction of invasive species according to Miles. Yes, so I've heard, probably you've heard that incident before. I'm not sure if you were already alive during that time, but it was actually um reported and of course featured in many documentary films or documentary na mga TV segments wherein it was reported that um a certain janitor fish was actually dumped in a body of water, either lake or ocean, lake or river. And fortunately the the janitor fish, which was grown from the tank or sa kaning fish, I'm not sure kan sang alang basta sa fish, or meaning it was treated as a pet, but probably the pet owner realized that he or she can no longer sustain or care for that janitor fish. He or she decided to simply dispose it sa body of water. But unfortunately, um, um, your janitor fish are actually very, very tough fish, wherein it is tough for you to kill this because they can actually adapt to any forms of environment. So as a result, um, not only that it is actually kanang competing to the resources of that particular body of water. Another thing na nakakos why this particular organism threatens the diversity is that aside from competing, they also ate the eggs of other fishes present in that bodies of water. So it also presented a problem in terms of the number of growing members on top, because they actually ate or targeted the fish, other fish in the in that area. So how about this one? So probably you've noticed this one, especially that the we are now in the season of election season. So mga political rallies, kakampings, unit team, or other political affiliations. So what do you think is being presented here on the screen? Okay, there are too many population, or there are too many people or organisms competing for the same resources. That's why, of course, um, um, it's very difficult if you have a lot of mouths to feed and your resources is not enough. So probably kanang sa mga families that who are struggling financially, plus naapagidaghan kay na members in the family. So of course, sometimes it can actually lead to malnutrition, not being able to go to school, poor diet or poor hygiene, and so on. So that's for human aspect, but also that's also true to other organisms. So sometimes some organisms who are, it has been noted that some organisms that are actually kanang um let us say herbivore, and they, and if walay plants are available, they can actually shift their diet to carnivorous. So that's another form wherein mapugos ang mga animals to change their behavior to adapt with the with the changing environment. Okay, how about this one? So probably you can easily identify the factor here. Probably this is also true in your areas right now or in your room right now where you are. Okay, so yes, this is indeed an example of pollution. So as I've mentioned, pollution is not only limited to one form. It can be air, water, land, and of course, it can also be in a form of a noise pollution. Okay, how about this one? So unfortunately, as you can see, the polar bear here is now very, very malnourished and probably ill. All right. So Kes, Pauline, and Kate, this is an example of climate change. So you will notice that um, polar bears are actually one of the indicators that they are the organisms that are directly affected with climate change because they actually live in areas na naay mga iceberg. And since icebergs are now really, what you call this, melting on a faster rate, some of these icebergs tend to break. And therefore, before, they can actually stay on those icebergs. Pero since nag-melt siya and they break from the mainland, some of the some of the polar bears are actually displaced. All right. And some of them, they need to swim farther or a longer distance before, compared before, for them to be able to find food. Kaya naanay gap in between icebergs. So, of course, that's demanding on the part sa mga polar bears because they have to spend a lot of energy for them to travel from one place to another. Now, how about this one? So, this is a sad picture, but it's a true and real depiction of how humans are in terms of our greediness, in terms of getting the resources that we need. So, probably you're familiar with luxury items, di ba? So, mga kanang Louis Vuitton or other luxury items wherein they use fur as part of kanang the material for that item. Yes, Pauline, this is over exploitation. So you'll notice that how many tigers were actually hunted and of course killed in the process just for us to get the fur. 'Di ba? So it's a sad reality, but it's true. It's not only limited to luxury items. Even us, our mga daily activities, sometimes our daily needs, actually is an example of overexploitation. We are getting too much than what we actually need in the environment. Okay? So what I will do is that it's now 1:45 in the afternoon. So what I want you to do for the remaining 4 minutes is please take note of the following questions. And instead of writing them on the chat box, I would like you to answer this during your most convenient time. Probably some of these questions you will encounter them during our long test at the end of this week, or during our third session. Sorry, so if you look at our module, it's actually during the third session. So please take note. Question number one: what are the 6 human activities that cause species extinction? Describe each of the human activity. Now, among the six reasons that cause species extinction, which reason or cause is more evident in your community? So probably you're living now near in bodies of water, or probably you're living in a farm or in a private subdivision or urban places. So what's the reason or cause that's more prevalent or more observable in your area? And then lastly, how it affects other species and the people in the vicinity. So not necessarily ikaw lang or your family, but also other species. So if you're living in the farm, is it affecting the animals, not only the animals or organism in the farm, but also other organisms living near the farm, or kanang areas in, if you're living in a subdivision or an urban area, na abay effect sa mga organisms. Okay? So are there questions or clarifications for our discussion this afternoon? None so far. So before I end our session this afternoon, okay, a few reminders uh, in relation to our session for this week. So if you look at our module, you can actually see that The remaining four sessions, the first two sessions are dedicated or allotted for the last two formal discussions. So we already had the first one this afternoon, and then on Tuesday will be our final formal discussion, and then on Wednesday we will have our long test number 2, and then on Thursday, which is our session 4 or our final session for the week, is dedicated for our PT making. All right? Any questions, clarifications, violent reactions for our session this afternoon? Okay, so if you understood our discussion, may I ask everyone or anyone, may I ask or ask a favor, kindly activate your raise hand button just to simply confirm if you already understood our discussion, and of course if you are still here inside our Google Meet. Okay, again, everyone, please kindly activate your raise hand button if you understood our discussion, and of course, in a way, to confirm if you are still here inside our Google Meet. Okay, I'm still waiting for one more student to raise. Okay, two more students to raise his or her hand. Okay, her hand here. So one more student before I go. Again, please activate your raise hand button if you understood my instruction for this afternoon. Okay. So I noticed that some of you are actually getting disconnected. So hopefully you will stay inside the Google Meet throughout the afternoon and you will not encounter more problems later on with your other subject areas. All right. Again, let me leave the Google Meet with a challenge to everyone that again we're now on the final week, but it doesn't mean that because it's the final week when we can simply relax and allow ourselves um to be tempted to, of course, from many distractions that you might have, or to procrastinate. Please take note, it's the final few minutes in any activity or any competition or any marathon that you do that actually matters the most. Whether you will, this will actually determine your rank. You're already winners, but it will determine the rank that you will end up have at the end of the school year, whether you will have a gold, silver, or a bronze. And of course, all I as much as I want all of you to have a gold, but again, it all boils down to your dedication, your effort, and of course, what you really want for yourself. Okay? Take note, it's for yourself and not for me. Okay? So I think that's it for this afternoon. So I believe your teacher is already here, but she already left. Okay, I'm not sure if that's the teacher or the OOTD. So take care, everyone, and stay safe. Again, please, health is still important so that we can really do our part for this week. All right? Take care and God bless everyone. And of course, stay safe.